You think you'd never go back to a place that haunts your nightmares, right? But what if the only way to escape the terror was to face it head on? When I was just a kid, I spent one unforgettable summer at a cabin deep in the woods. It was supposed to be a vacation, but what happened there changed my life forever. Years later, I decided to return to that same cabin, not out of nostalgia, but to confront the lingering fear that had gripped me ever since. What I found there was far worse than I ever imagined. It all started when I was 10. My family had rented this remote cabin, tucked so far into the forest that cell service was non-existent, and the only sounds were the rustling of leaves and the occasional eerie howl of the wind. At first, it felt like an adventure, but then the strange occurrences started. Things moving on their own, whispers in the dead of night, and a presence I couldn't see but always felt. One night, something slammed against the cabin walls. My dad brushed it off as a bear, but I knew it wasn't. The scratching on the windows, the faint footsteps on the porch, whatever was out there wasn't just passing through. When we left, I thought I'd never see that place again. But the nightmares followed me, even as I grew older. Dreams of shadowy figures lurking in the trees, of something watching me from the darkness. I realized I couldn't live like this anymore. So, I made the decision to go back, alone, to confront whatever was still haunting me. Returning to the cabin after all those years was surreal. It looked almost the same, weathered by time, but still standing like a monument to my fears. As I walked up the creaking steps, I half expected the door to swing open on its own. Inside, the air was thick and stale, as if time had stopped the moment we left. I started exploring, retracing the steps of my childhood. That's when I noticed the first unsettling detail, a single old toy sitting in the corner. It was a stuffed bear I'd lost during that trip. But it wasn't dusty or decayed. It looked as if someone had placed it there recently. As night fell, the cabin seemed to come alive. The walls creaked and groaned, but not from the wind. Shadows danced in the corners, but there was no light source to cast them. And then, just like before, came the scratching. I tried to rationalize it. Maybe it really was an animal, but deep down, I knew better. When the footsteps started, soft but deliberate, pacing just outside the door, every hair on my body stood on end. I armed myself with a flashlight and decided to investigate. Stepping outside, the forest seemed to close in around me. The air was colder, heavier. That's when I saw it, a figure standing at the edge of the trees. It wasn't a person, though. Its shape was wrong, its movements unnatural, as if it was learning how to be human, but hadn't quite figured it out. I don't know what possessed me to speak, but I did. "What do you want?" I shouted, my voice trembling. The figure tilted its head, as if considering my question. Then it took a step forward. That's when I realized it wasn't alone. Figures began to emerge from the shadows, each one more twisted than the last. They moved closer, and I stumbled back into the cabin, slamming the door shut. The whispers started then, faint but unmistakable. They weren't coming from outside, they were inside the cabin, surrounding me. My flashlight flickered, and in its dying beam, I saw something written on the walls in what looked like ash. "You came back." The door rattled violently, as if something was trying to get in. Desperation took over, and I screamed, "Leave me alone!" And just like that, everything stopped. The whispers, the rattling, the shadows, it all vanished. When the sun rose, the cabin was eerily quiet. The writing on the walls was gone, and the toy bear was missing. I left that place and didn't look back, but I couldn't shake the feeling that whatever was there had let me go. For now. I learned something that night. Sometimes, facing your fears doesn't mean defeating them. Sometimes it means surviving them. If you want more stories that will keep you on edge, hit subscribe and stay tuned.